Now, despite the fall in oil prices, fuel prices in Nigeria have been soaring. The country's Labour Congress is now threatening an indefinite strike unless government goes back to the original price. Authorities have increased fuel pump prices by almost double. The Labour Congress has given government 3 days to respond. The Congress is also urging Nigerians to stockpile food ahead of the strike. The prices went up after government removed a fuel subsidy. The country's finance minister says the subsidy is simply too much of a drain on finances. But during election campaigning, President Muhammadu Buhari had assured Nigerians that the subsidy would not be removed. Well, let's get you more now on those developments coming from Nigeria. We're joined live from Lagos by CCTV's Deji Badmus. Deji, just talk us through some of the main grievances that have led to the threat of the strike.
Well, Lindy, the long and short of it is that the labor unions in the country, especially the Nigerian Labour Congress now, basically wants the government to bring down the price of petrol. The price of petrol, was increased by the government, as you have reported last week, and because the government says it can no longer sustain the subsidy payment. Now, the labor unions are angry that, according to them now, they said they were not consulted, even though the government said it actually called a meeting before making that announcement. It called a meeting, and that meeting involved the labor unions, and that at the meeting they all agreed to remove the subsidy. But after the government made the announcement, the Nigerian Labour Congress came out to say it was not what was discussed at that meeting, that they had no agreement at the meeting that that the government was going to remove subsidy. So the labor union, now I'm talking about the Nigerian Labour Congress now, is asking the government to go back, or else they would commence a full-scale strike on Wednesday. But something very instructive about this is that the labor unions themselves are divided. I mean, the core unions in the oil sector have actually, the unions now, two of them, Pengerson and New Peng, they've backed out of the strike. As a matter of fact, they've said they support the deregulation of the downstream sector and the removal of subsidy. But the NLC, that's the Nigerian Labour Congress now, says it is pressing ahead with the strike unless the government reduces the price of petrol.
And at this point, Deji, has there been any word from government on the way forward to avoid the strike?
Well, of course. I mean, the government has spoken. The vice president actually issued a statement appealing to people to show some understanding that the government, I mean, the country hasn't got enough resources to sustain the continued payment of subsidy. And we also understand that the government will be meeting with the labor unions today to try as much as possible to convince them. When I say the labor unions now, I mean the Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress. They are the two unions that are threatening to go on strike to shut down the country. So we understand there's going to be a meeting today. The government will be meeting with both unions now to try to convince them not to embark on the strike. That meeting will be holding sometime later today. Now, whether the government will be able to convince these unions now not to go on strike is difficult to tell, because the unions have insisted that nothing will make them change their mind unless the government brings down the price of petrol to what it used to be before, which was something around 86 naira 50 kobo. Lindy.
Well, to just paint a picture for us, if you could, Deji, of what the situation is like on the ground today for regular citizens. Fuel prices are soaring. We know that there's been some shortages, and the Congress is even telling people to stockpile food. How serious is the situation as it stands at the moment?
Well, to be candid, Nigerians are divided over whether or not, the labor unions should go on strike. We have quite a number of Nigerians supporting the government position, saying that it's necessary to remove the subsidy. And you also have a number of people who continue to maintain that it is wrong to remove subsidy at this time and that things are difficult. Of course, we've had situations where we've seen people stockpiling on food, just as the labor unions advised. But some people are still very skeptical that the strike action will be effective, especially since the unions in the oil sector, I'm talking about New Peng and Pengerson now, that they are not taking part in this strike action, that it's doubtful that it's going to be effective. But other than that, I mean, we've seen the disappearance of fuel queues at petrol stations. As soon as, the price of petrol was increased, The long queues suddenly disappeared. Now, you don't have queues as such at filling stations, even though you still have some bit of scarcity, but not the kind of queues we used to have. But altogether, people are divided over this, to be candid, Lindy. People are divided. Some people are supporting it, some people are not. Some people are advising the Nigeria Labour Congress not to think about the strike, not to go on the strike, that the strike will inflict more hardship on people. But you have those who are saying, look, the Nigeria Labour Congress should go on that strike and that the government should bring down the price. So it's more or less like, you know, a divided house, so to speak, on the issue of this subsidy removal in Nigeria, Lindy.
We'll be watching to see how the situation develops in the run-up to Wednesday. Thanks very much, Deji Bedmos, live for us there in Lagos.